In a luxurious office in the heart of a bustling city, Ricardo Mendez, the owner of one of the largest tech companies in the country, sat in his room. He had everything a man could desire: wealth, power, and a seemingly perfect life. But something was eating away at him from the inside. It was about his assistant, Camila. Camila, a simple woman with dark hair and a calm presence, had worked with Ricardo for years. She was intelligent, discreet, and most importantly, had always stood by him during tough times, when the business world seemed to want to bring him down. But what Ricardo didn't know was that their relationship was about to change forever. For years, he saw Camila only as his assistant, someone who did the work without question. But over time, something began to change. The two started exchanging longer glances, and their conversations became deeper. However, nothing was said. Not even Laura, Ricardo's wife, suspected anything. One summer morning, Ricardo walked into the office and was greeted by Camila, as usual. He looked at her and, without thinking of the consequences, called her for a private conversation. "Camila, I need you to listen to me," Ricardo said seriously. She, surprised, sat down in front of him, with her hands on the table. "Of course, Mr. Mendez. What happened? You're no longer fit to work here. The company needs new directions, and your work no longer matches what we need," Ricardo said with a firm voice that tried to hide a hint of regret. Camila remained silent for a moment, trying to process what she had just heard. She had dedicated years to the job, putting her loyalty above all else, but never imagined this would happen. Her expression was one of shock, but she tried to maintain her composure. "I understand, Mr. Mendez. If that's what you want, I will leave," Camila said, her voice trembling but firm. She didn't ask the reason for the dismissal or argue the decision. She felt there was something more behind his words, something she couldn't understand, but felt deeply. With the decision made, Camila took her belongings and said goodbye to the office for the last time. Ricardo watched her leave, with a strange and uncomfortable feeling taking over him. He knew the future was uncertain, but believed he had done what was best for the success of the company. However, what he didn't know was that, after Camila's dismissal, his life would start to change in unexpected ways. The company continued to grow, his wife Laura remained by his side, and he became increasingly involved in work. But over time, something started to bother him deeply. He felt a void he couldn't fill, a discomfort that haunted him even in his quietest moments. One afternoon, while reviewing financial reports, a thought occurred to him. Where is Camila? He tried to remember the last day he saw her, but the memories were blurry. Camila had left without leaving any traces. He only knew that she had returned to her hometown, but never managed to find out more. He had no more contact with her, nor knew about her life after the dismissal. For some reason, Camila's absence tormented him. Something didn't feel right, and he knew he had made a mistake. The decision he made that morning seemed increasingly wrong, but it was too late to change the past. While Ricardo struggled with his thoughts, Camila's life took a very different turn. She had returned to her hometown and started a new life far from everything that reminded her of the Millionaire. Her life was now focused on raising her son, Pedro, a child she hadn't expected but who completed her in a way she never imagined. Time passed, and Ricardo's life went on, but the unrest inside him did not diminish. He tried to convince himself that firing Camila was the right decision for the company's good, but couldn't avoid the feeling that something was lost. Every time he faced his work, his successes, his family, Camila's presence seemed to echo in his mind. Meanwhile, Camila lived a simple but happy life. After her dismissal, she had moved to a small town, far from the hustle and bustle of the big city. She married an ordinary man, Jose, a worker at a local shop, and soon found herself pregnant. The pregnancy had not been planned, but looking at the little being growing inside her, Camila knew it was an opportunity to start anew. She wanted to give her son the life she had always dreamed of, a life of love, simplicity, and respect, far from the luxury she had witnessed in the past. Months passed, and Camila gave birth to a boy, little Pedro. Although she didn't have much money, she devoted herself entirely to her son. Jose, her husband, was always dedicated, and although the couple didn't have great wealth, they found happiness in simple things. Camila's life was now anchored in the present, with no more looks to the past. She knew she had made the right choice, although fate seemed to play cruelly with her. Meanwhile, Ricardo remained immersed in his business and family life. Despite his success, a sense of loss accompanied him like a shadow that wouldn't leave. He no longer spoke about Camila with anyone, but in his moments of solitude, he wondered, what happened to her? He knew he couldn't go back, but deep down, he wished he could change the way things had happened. One night, after a long day at work, Ricardo received an unexpected call. It was his accountant, informing him that the company was facing a significant financial problem. Without further ado, Ricardo knew he would have to make big changes to solve the situation. But in his mind, a single question persisted. Where is Camila? What happened to her? He needed to know. Determined to find Camila, Ricardo hired a private detective. He knew the investigation wouldn't be easy, especially because Camila had disappeared without leaving any traces. But he wasn't willing to give up. The detective assured him that he would start the search and, over time, the clues would emerge. Ricardo didn't know what to expect, but in his heart, something told him he needed to find answers. Meanwhile, Camila continued with her peaceful life until the past, in an unexpected way, knocked on her door. She was at home caring for Pedro when the phone rang. On the other end of the line, a familiar but strange voice made her tremble. Camila, it's Ricardo Mendez. For a moment, she remained silent. Her mind raced back to the past, to the time when he was her boss, the man who had fired her without explanations. But it wasn't just that. She remembered the look in his eyes, the way he always treated her with respect, even though in the end, he had pushed her out of his life. Ricardo, what do you want? She asked, trying to stay calm. I know you probably hate me, but I need your help. Something has happened to the company. We are on the brink of financial collapse, and I need someone I can trust. I deeply regret what I did. I made a terrible mistake, and now I'm asking for your help. Camila felt the weight of those words. She knew he was serious, and the sincerity in his voice made her hesitate. For so long, she thought she would never see him again, that he wouldn't care to have her in his life again. But something about it seemed different. The man she knew in the past was seeking redemption, and now she had to decide what to do with it. I don't know, Ricardo. I have nothing to do with your company. My life is here, with my son. You made your choice when you fired me, and I moved on. I don't know what you expect from me, she replied, with a feeling of anger mixed with sadness. But Ricardo wasn't willing to give up so easily. I know the dismissal was a mistake, and I deeply regret it. But what happened between us, what you did for me, will never be forgotten. You were the only person who truly understood me. Now I need you. The company, my life, everything is at stake. Camila felt the weight of his words. An internal struggle began. She knew that her past with Ricardo was not something easy to forget, but she also knew that forgiveness was necessary to move forward. Without more words, she hung up the phone, leaving the decision for tomorrow. After the call with Ricardo, Camila was pensive. She didn't know if it was a good idea to get involved in the corporate world again, or with Ricardo. But the situation seemed more complex than she had imagined. It wasn't just a matter of business. She felt that there was something more, something that still hadn't been resolved between them. It was hard not to remember everything she had experienced in the past, the way he had treated her, the unfulfilled promises, and the unspoken words. At the same time, she knew her life had completely changed. Her son Pedro was now the reason for her existence. The love she felt for him made her question any decision that might take her away from the simple life she had built. While Camila pondered, Ricardo continued his search for answers. He felt a growing pain, a regret that consumed him inside. He knew he should have done things differently, but now he couldn't go back. What remained was a plea for help that he knew was his last chance to redeem himself, not only in relation to the business, but also in relation to what he felt for Camila, something he had never recognized before. Tension mounted as Camila and Ricardo approached the crucial moment of their lives. Camila needed to make a difficult decision, and Ricardo knew his only chance to regain her trust was to show that this time he was willing to change. The sun was setting when Camila finally made a decision. Her heart was divided, and Ricardo's decision, full of complexity, made her hesitate. But she knew she couldn't ignore what she felt. When she picked up the phone again, she heard Ricardo's familiar voice, which seemed more vulnerable than ever. "Camila, you know me, and I know I made a mistake. But the company is on the brink of collapse, and I need you. It's not just about business. It's not about work anymore. I need you as a person, as someone who can help me understand what I'm really doing wrong. Please, accept my proposal to come back. I want you to help rebuild everything together." Camila remained silent for a few moments, the weight of his words sinking into her mind. She knew he was being sincere, but she also knew what it would mean for her personal life. The truth was that by returning, she would have to deal with her unresolved feelings for him, and that wouldn't be easy. "Ricardo, you don't know what you're asking. I have a life now, I have a child to care for. I can't just come back and leave everything behind," Camila replied, her voice full of emotion. "I understand, Camila. I completely understand. But the truth is, you were never just my assistant. I fell in love with you, and I know that, in some way, you felt the same. I'm not asking you to go back to the past, but to build a new future where we can be equals, where you can be respected, where you get what you always deserved. I can't do this without you." Those words touched Camila deeply. She felt the weight of honesty in his voice, the pain of someone who is finally admitting his mistakes. For years, she had harbored her anger and sadness, but hearing those words, something inside her broke. "I need time to think, Ricardo. This is not easy for me," Camila said, trying to contain the emotion that threatened to overflow. With a heavy sigh, he replied, "Of course I'll wait. But please, think carefully. I just want to do this right." When the phone was hung up, Camila felt exhausted. Her head was a whirlwind of emotions. The simple life she had built with Pedro seemed at risk, but Ricardo's plea was impossible to ignore. It was a decision that could change her life and her son's forever. The following days were marked by deep introspection. Camila spent hours thinking about what to do, but the truth was that Ricardo's proposal was stirring her emotions in ways she couldn't control. Meanwhile, Ricardo couldn't keep thoughts of Camila away. He knew his plea had been impulsive, but he also knew he needed her more than ever. The sense of emptiness in his heart grew every day. On a cold autumn night, Camila walked down the street, reflecting on her conversation with Ricardo. Her steps echoed on the sidewalk, and the city seemed more distant than ever. She looked at the city lights, but something inside her made her think of the simplicity of her new life, far from everything that troubled her in the past. She now felt complete with Pedro by her side, but the future Ricardo offered was something she couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, Ricardo was in his office, looking at the city that was once his kingdom. He felt empty, as if everything he had achieved no longer had meaning. He knew that financial success was no longer what he desired. He wanted something more, something he felt had been missing for years. He wanted Camila back. With a heavy heart, he picked up the phone and called her once more. This time, his voice was firm, but full of a sadness he couldn't hide. "Camila, I know you have your life, and I understand that you have doubts. But I just want you to know one thing. I am a different man now. I'm willing to do everything for us, for Pedro. If you want me to go there and help in any way, I'll be there. You just need to tell me. I'm no longer the man you knew, and if you give me a chance, I'll do everything it takes for us to build something new." She didn't respond immediately. The silence between them felt denser than ever. But deep down, Camila knew he was telling the truth. She knew there was something more between them, something that couldn't be ignored. Even if the world was complicated, the feeling she still had for Ricardo seemed to be greater than any obstacle. After many days of reflection, Camila finally made her decision. She knew she couldn't stay trapped in the past forever, but she also knew she couldn't move forward without making peace with him and herself. So, she picked up the phone and called Ricardo back. "Ricardo, let's talk. I want to see you." The two arranged to meet at a discreet cafe downtown. Camila knew this would be a decisive moment, a point of no return. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to face whatever came. When they met, the tension was palpable. Ricardo looked at Camila, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. He saw her differently now, not just as his former assistant, but as someone who had become an important part of his life. She, in turn, looked at him with caution but also a glimpse of something more. Camila, I really want to change. I want to do the right thing. I can't promise that everything will be perfect, but I can promise that I'll do everything necessary for us to have a chance. I love you, Camila. I always have, he said, finally expressing what she needed to hear. Camila felt immense relief, a mixture of emotions she didn't know she still carried. She had never imagined hearing those words, but now that she had, she knew the decision was in her hands. I've always loved you too, Ricardo. But before taking any steps, I need time. I have Pedro to care for. He's my priority now, Camila said, her voice full of emotion. Ricardo smiled, knowing that even if it took time, he was willing to wait for her. He knew that this time, he would do things differently. And so, under the city lights, they began a new chapter in their lives, where forgiveness and redemption intertwined on an uncertain but hopeful path. Time passed, and changes began to happen slowly but steadily. Camila continued to live her life with Pedro, but now with a new perspective. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew that with Ricardo by her side, they might be able to build something real. Ricardo, in turn, felt that he was finally on the right path. He believed that this time, he could redeem himself and find true happiness. Together, they began to tread a path full of challenges, but also hope. And even though the past would always be a part of who they were, the future seemed more promising than ever. Camila's first step was to allow the relationship with Ricardo to be rebuilt, but this time on a solid foundation. She knew he had changed, but also knew that true change would only be possible if she herself was honest with her feelings. Pedro was still a priority, but she couldn't ignore the fact that Ricardo was genuinely trying to be a better person. This made her reflect deeply. Ricardo, for his part, continued to surprise her with his dedication. He had changed in a way she couldn't have imagined. The arrogant man who had pushed her away without a second thought was giving way to the man she had always known he could be, but had never had the chance to see. He was no longer seeking her attention because of his position or power, but because he knew she was the only one who could help him rebuild himself, just as she was trying to rebuild herself. Weeks passed, and Ricardo and Camila began to reconnect more and more. Their conversations became more sincere, deeper. The distance that had existed between them now seemed small compared to what they had lived through together. Ricardo's apologies, his quest for redemption, and his willingness to understand Camila's reasons created a space where forgiveness began to grow. They started to explore new aspects of their relationship, this time without haste, without the urgency of the past. Camila realized that trust, although difficult to regain, was beginning to strengthen. They were no longer just together out of a professional bond, but out of a genuine desire to build something deeper. Camila's life had changed significantly over the past few months. Ricardo's work was still a priority, but their relationship was also expanding beyond the confines of the office. She started to trust him again, but more than that, she noticed that her son Pedro felt something was changing. The boy began to ask questions about his mother's past, about who that man really was who now seemed to be a constant presence in their lives. It was on a cold Sunday afternoon, when Camila was organizing things at home, that Pedro, with the curiosity typical of a 7-year-old, questioned her about the past. "Mom, who is Ricardo? Is he my father?" Pedro asked while playing with his toys on the floor. Camila stopped for a moment, surprised by the question. She knew that, sooner or later, she would have to explain the situation to her son. Sitting next to him, she answered carefully, "No, Pedro, Ricardo is not your father. He was someone very important in my life, but now he's trying to be a better person. He wants to be a part of our lives, but only if you want that too." Pedro looked at her seriously, trying to understand what it all meant. "Will he stay with us?" he asked, his big eyes wide. Camila took a deep breath, feeling the need to be honest with her son. I don't know, Pedro. What I know is that time will show us what we should do. And with that simple answer, Camila realized that she was no longer just living for herself. Now, her decisions needed to be shared with Pedro. He was part of the process, and his approval and understanding were fundamental. As Ricardo and Camila reconnected, the company also went through a period of transition. Ricardo's old empire was on the brink of collapse due to years of neglect and wrong decisions. But with Camila's arrival, the recovery work began gradually but promisingly. Camila brought new ideas and a long-term vision that Ricardo had never considered before. However, the challenges were immense. It was like rebuilding a house damaged by a violent storm. Ricardo had distanced himself so much from management that many employees no longer believed in his ability. Many doubted he could reclaim the place the company once held in the market. In a crucial meeting, when everyone was gathered around the table, the looks were skeptical. Camila watched the faces around the room carefully. She knew that Ricardo's comeback would only be possible if he could regain everyone's respect. And for that, he would need to show he was willing to change. I know many of you doubt me, Ricardo began with a firm voice. And I don't blame you. I made mistakes, many mistakes. But I'm here today to show that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild this company. I'm not the same man as before. I've learned that success isn't measured only by numbers, but by the respect and trust we build together. He looked at Camila, who was by his side, and continued. Camila and I have been through a lot together, and I know that together, we can make this company grow again. I trust her, and I hope you will too. The room fell silent for a moment, but eventually, some of the attendees began to see the sincerity in Ricardo's words. They knew that for the company to prosper, it would be necessary to leave the past behind and focus on the future. As work at the company continued, Ricardo and Camila, as new partners, kept moving forward with Ricardo's empire rebuilding. They were not only working together, but now shared a common vision. Camila helped Ricardo make more sensible and thoughtful decisions, always keeping the well-being of the company and its employees in mind. Over time, the trust between them solidified. They began to understand that what really mattered was the joint effort, not the solitary pursuit of success. Together, they created a shared vision for the future, where the company's growth no longer came at the expense of people. Pedro, who was starting to feel more stability and security, also began to understand that things were changing for the better. He was happier, more excited about the idea that his mother was finally in a place where she felt valued. Gradually, Ricardo and Camila were building not just a professional partnership, but a new relationship based on respect and understanding. What once seemed improbable now became increasingly possible, a new chance for everyone. Ricardo and Camila had made great strides, both in their professional and personal lives. The company was beginning to recover, and their relationship was slowly consolidating. However, Ricardo's past was still a shadow, something he knew he would need to face once and for all. It was during a business trip that the past presented itself unexpectedly. Ricardo was in an important meeting in another state when, entering the hotel lobby, he spotted a familiar figure, Laura, his ex-wife. The encounter was as unexpected as it was disturbing. Laura, with the same serious expression he remembered, was standing near the reception. She looked older, but still had an aura of authority in her stance. Ricardo felt a chill down his spine at the sight of her. He knew this moment was inevitable, but he still wasn't prepared to face her. "Ricardo," Laura said, with a tone that mixed surprise and disdain. "I can't believe you're still here, after everything." Ricardo approached, trying to control the nervousness that began to grow in his chest. "Laura, I didn't know you'd be here." She smiled ironically. "Life is full of surprises. You're still doing business, aren't you? It seems your company is recovering." He hesitated for a moment before responding. "We're trying. But more than that, I'm trying to correct the mistakes I made." Laura looked with a skeptical expression, as if the idea of change was completely absurd to her. "The mistakes, Ricardo? It's not just about your mistakes. How do you feel looking at the child you didn't have the privilege to see grow up? How do you feel knowing things could have been different if you'd made other decisions?" Those words, which once might have seemed harsh, now felt even more cutting. Ricardo felt the guilt and regret surge with force, but he also realized that he was no longer the man Laura had known. He was, in a way, dealing with it, trying to correct his flaws, even if it wasn't enough for her. "Laura, I know I can't change the past. And I know I can't expect your forgiveness. But I'm trying to be a better person for me, for Pedro, for everyone who still believes in me." Laura observed in silence for a moment before sighing. "Maybe. But I can't be part of this anymore. You'll have to go on your way, without expecting me to follow." That was the last time Ricardo saw Laura. She left, leaving him with a mix of pain and relief. It was the closing of a chapter that he knew could never be completely erased. But at the same time, it was the beginning of a new journey. As Ricardo faced the consequences of his past, Camila found herself in a delicate position. Her relationship with him was becoming deeper, but she couldn't help but question if this new Ricardo was someone she could truly trust. She wanted to believe he had changed, but the shadow of his departure years earlier still loomed in her mind. It was on a quiet afternoon in the office, while Ricardo was in a meeting out of town, that Camila made her decision. She knew she couldn't keep living with the certainty that he might fail again. She needed to take control of her life and ensure she wouldn't be a victim of his choices anymore. Pedro, who until then had accepted the changes happening, also began to ask harder questions. He noticed how tense Camila seemed, and this made her realize that her son felt the changes but still didn't completely understand them. She knew she would need to talk to him, so he wouldn't be caught off guard when she made an important decision. When Ricardo returned from the business trip, he found Camila in her office. She seemed determined, firmer than he had ever seen her. He knew something was about to change. "Camila, what happened? You seem distant," he said, as he entered the office and noticed her worried expression. Camila looked him in the eyes and, with surprising calm, replied, "Ricardo, I need to talk to you about something important. Something that involves not just our future, but Pedro's too." He was on alert, recognizing the seriousness in her voice. "What happened? Is everything all right? I need to know. I need to know that you are fully committed to this change. Not just for the company, but for us, for our family. I can't live in uncertainty anymore. I can't carry the weight of my doubts and insecurities. We can't move forward if I'm not sure that you've truly changed. And more importantly, that this is what you want now. You've made so many promises in the past, Ricardo, and I really need you to show me that you're ready to do this for us." Ricardo was silent for a long moment. He knew this was his chance to prove to Camila that he was no longer just throwing words to the wind. He moved closer to her, sitting beside her. "Camila, I know I can't erase what happened. I know you have every right to doubt me. But what I can do now is assure you that today I am a different person. I want to build a life with you, a life that is worthy of the trust you placed in me. And if you give me the chance, I will do everything to prove that I can be the man you deserve." I am not the same Ricardo as before. Camila felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She didn't know what the future held, but something inside her said that it might be possible to try again. She looked at him with softer eyes. "I want to believe in you, Ricardo. I want to believe that we can make this work. But that will only happen if you continue to prove that you can be who you say you are. I need that, for me, for Pedro, for all of us." Over time, the changes in Ricardo and Camila's lives began to bloom. Camila's trust was restored, though the path to forgiveness was still long. They were rebuilding their family in a solid way, albeit more cautiously. Their relationship deepened, and work at the company continued at full steam. Pedro, who had previously only observed the changes, now took an active part in this new phase. He understood that his mother and Ricardo were trying to build a better foundation, and over time, he began to accept Ricardo's presence in his life more naturally. Ricardo and Camila knew the biggest challenge still lay ahead in the future. They had taken an important step, but now needed to ensure that the lessons of the past were not forgotten. Rebuilding their lives, both professionally and personally, was a difficult journey, but one worth fighting for. They knew that the true victory would be the one they achieved together.